Hi, welcome to my Authentic Learning Project video using Storybird in the classroom to integrate ICT and English in teaching. I'm doing an ebook creator called Storybird, which is an application that can be used across any platform. I'm doing English Year 6. The curriculum outcomes is create literary texts that adapt or combine aspects of texts students have experienced in innovative ways. I also have, that's the main one, I also have other ones that this ties into, such as creating narratives in written, spoken or multimodal digital format for more than one specified audience, requiring adaptation of narrative elements and language features. Planning and creating texts that entertain, inform, inspire and or emotionally engage familiar and less familiar audiences. Plan, draft and publish imaginative, informative and persuasive texts, choosing and experimenting with text structures, language features, images and digital resource appropriate to purpose and audience. Reread and edit students' own and others' work using agreed criteria and explaining editing choices. Use a range of software including word processing programs, learning new function as required to create texts. So that ties in with creating text through Storybird. So the task, which is pretty basic on here but will be expanded more in my actual authentic learning project. So basically the finished product will be 2 ebooks written by my hypothetical Year 6 class to present to their hypothetical or a hypothetical Year 2 or Year 3 class. So it's got 2 parts to this project. The first ebook will be a compilation of students' 5-sentence stories as an example of what a 5-sentence story looks like. The 5-sentence stories is a prompt or a guideline, I suppose, that is introduced in Year 2 and worked on in Year 3 when introducing narrative texts. The second ebook will be individual stories written and published for the same age group and will showcase more in-depth narrative writing as an example of how a story can grow from 5 sentences to a whole picture book. So the 5-sentence story process. So to begin the writing process, students are introduced to the 5-sentence story format and as a class discuss what language is appropriate for a Year 2-3 age group. So basically they're introduced to this task and there's a few lessons leading up to what they will actually write. Again, that will be more in-depth in my actual project. Students are then introduced to Storybird. I've already added students to the class on the app, which will also be shown on my blog post, or my website for my final project. Students are able to go through the illustrations available on Storybird and explore. Then they pick one they want to base their 5-sentence story on. Students practice their stories before writing them into Storybird and compiling the class stories into one book. So each student has 1 page with their picture and their text that goes with that. This is then published and made available to the Year 2-3 class for a resource on what a 5-sentence story can look like. So once it's published, it's available online indefinitely. Or it can be published into a hardback if we wanted to do that. The process, individual stories, students are able to browse through illustrations in Storybird and get an idea of what they would like to base their narrative writing on. So they can either expand from their original picture or they can choose a new one. I haven't decided yet. When students have chosen their illustration groups, they begin their narrative stories. Teacher to assist in any spelling, grammar and structural issues like sentence structure and narrative, what makes a narrative. When students are happy with their stories, they are able to ask a peer to read through and make sure the flow, structure, spelling and grammar is correct. Finally, students are able to publish their stories and present them to the Year 2-3 class as a resource on narrative writing, as well as for their enjoyment. Within Storybird, there is a printing option, as I've mentioned before. That does cost money, so that could be factored in. I'm not 100% sure as yet, to get their stories printed into hard copy, which is also an option. This project is authentic, as it has a real-life use in the way of a resource for younger years, as a 5-sentence story example, as well as being available online for students to access outside the school. Through the use of Storybird, students are able to actively engage with the writing process, encouraging reluctant writers or reluctant illustrators the opportunity to engage fully when writing narratives. The teachers to provide modelling of all lessons prior to students' commencement of any tasks, as well as ongoing support throughout the writing process. Students are able to gain multiple perspectives through the language used for younger year groups. Students are collaborating to create the first ebook, as each student contributes a page to the final product. Students are encouraged to reflect on the writing process, recalling what stories ignited their imaginations when they were in Year 2-3, and how also, how they've gone through the writing process and, what they feel is where they've gained or what they need to work on, and, basically sort of reflect on the whole process. Students discuss as a class what the identifying features of a narrative are, what narratives must include, and what makes a good story. Teacher to provide scaffolding of all tasks to enable students to move from one lesson to the next, as well as feedback for all students throughout the writing process. Students to critically evaluate each other's stories at certain times. For example, when students have completed introduction and setting the scene paragraphs, we can go through and do that before they move on, enabling students to keep on task, giving them the opportunity to make changes as they go along. The teacher is to make both formal and informal assessments of each student as the writing process evolves. Storybird is an online ebook creator application that can be used both on iPads, MacBooks, smartphones and Android operating systems. Can be used across any platform. Storybird has thousands of illustrations that can be used for inspiration to help students kickstart the writing process, eliminating the fear of the blank page. Storybird is easy to use and has how-to tutorials available. Any story published with Storybird is available indefinitely, and there are thousands of published stories available for students to read. Chapter books, picture books and poetry pages are able to be created. Storybird is free to join, use and publish books too. The only cost involved, if you choose to do it, is for students' ebooks to be printed into hard copy. Everything else is free. There are writing challenges available regularly for teacher inspiration, and student books can be used as a school fundraiser to raise money for class funds. That's an additional option if you so choose to do that. It sounds really good. I don't know how great it would be in practice, but it's another option. Storybird is fun and interactive for students of any age group, appeals to both boys and girls, and helps students make literacy gains through reading, writing and comprehension. These are a small sample of illustrations available from Storybird, as well as all of the little pictures on each of my slides. So there's lots of different options. There's thousands and thousands and thousands. Really, children's imagination is the limit. Thank you for listening, and I'm sorry it's so late.